Ron Newby, and he has talked about his work with security at Rocky Flats, and this is an oral history for the Maria Rogers Oral History Project of the Carnegie Library and the Rocky Flats Cold War Museum. And Ron, as I asked you before, would you mind saying again, when and where were you born?
Well, I was born in Caldwell, Idaho, just outside of Boise, Idaho, in 1937, October 14th. My folks were there basically because of economic times. Very tough in Oklahoma where they lived at the time. Yeah. They eventually moved back to Oklahoma as I was about 1 or 2 years old. So spent very little time in Idaho, raised in Oklahoma.
Good. Now, as we mentioned, we're going to attach this oral history to the previous ones that you've done some years ago. I just wanted to ask you some general questions about what the different buildings were like in Rocky Flats. First, you might talk a little bit about being on the security force. How did that impact your going in and out of the buildings? What was that like?
Well, the security force, of course, was designed to protect personnel and property owned by the United States government at Rocky Flats. So as such, we had access to all the buildings, and we ran patrols through all the buildings, inside and outside the building. So we were pretty well familiar with most of the buildings on site.
Were you able to get in and out of any building you wanted?
Yes.
Okay, so you had some kind of badge?
Yes, our badges allowed us to go into all of the areas, of course, and the restrictions were not on access. The restrictions would have been in certain areas of the buildings that may have posed some health concerns. So there may have been certain areas of the buildings at certain times that we were not able to access, but for the most part, we were able to access every area of the plant site.
In thinking about back to that whole plant site, was there any one particular building that stands out in your memory?
No, not particularly. I guess our headquarters building, the security building, headquarters, building 121, which I spent most of my time in, particularly when I became manager. Building has some special significance to me.
What was that like? Was it a big building?
No, not very big. No, it was a nondescript government type concrete building, and we had our communications center there, as we call it, a dispatch center, that all of the alarm systems reported to from all over the plant site. So that area was fairly restrictive to whom we would let into that area. The rest of the building was just offices and locker rooms for the security inspectors change out. We had our armory there, where we kept the firearms for the security inspectors and that sort of thing. But as far as the building goes, it's just a nondescript government building.
What are any of the other kind of the ways the building were constructed? Can you?
Well, after as we progressed through time at Rocky Flats, you learned various things in how you could construct buildings and how you could do the production activities and ancillary activities of the plant site. The one building that was built prior to my being at Rocky Flats, prior to my coming to Rocky Flats, 881 building, for instance, was built in the side of a hill, most of it underground, and the walls and floors and ceilings, when they built them then, were built of stainless steel. The thinking at that point in time was needed that for protection from the outside world as much as from the production that was going on in the building. With the advent of thermonuclear weapons, it didn't do much good to hide it in the side of a hill, because it was going to come find you anyway if that enemy was to drop one of those things on you. So as they went through the process of building buildings after that, they didn't find it necessary to use the stainless steel and those kinds of things that they thought they needed to in the early days. So in that respect, there were changes in the building structure. There were also, after the 1969 fire in building 776, 777, when they built the replacement building, which was 707 building, things learned during the fire in building 776 were incorporated in the building of 707. Compartmentalization was a big thing there. We learned that you could compartmentalize the building. You could build little, in fact, each of the compartments of that building had a little dam, if you will, like a speed bump, concrete speed bump on the floor, so that if one area you had to use water in one area, for instance, on a fire, it wouldn't flow around into the rest of the building. So those are the kinds of things that they learned as we progressed through history, that you didn't need some things and maybe you needed some other things, and you learned those from sometimes trial and error.
Were there changes? I think that you and others have described that there were changes in the fences, the construction of the security fences.
Oh, yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
When I first went there, I started work there in September of 1967. We were in an era at that time that most everyone in the country agreed that we needed a strong national defense, and we didn't have very many enemies, let me put it that way, at Rocky Flats. So we had basically an area that had a fence around it, a chain link fence, with smaller areas inside that had their own little chain link fences, security areas, each of which had various levels of access authorization that said if you needed access there, you could have it. If you didn't need to go into those little areas. So that's kind of the way it was set up. Island security inside of a regular 8-foot chain link fence around the basically 350 acres of the interior of the plant site. As again the world situation progressed, one of the big events that started the United States security community on a different path was the Munich Olympics, where the Israelis were attacked and killed by terrorist activity. That started a chain of events that led us to kind of where we were today, or at the close of as when we stopped production at Rocky Flats, that we needed to have a little bit better protection than we had in the past. So there were a lot of changes through the years as far as strengthening those islands of security within the plant site, both from a physical security standpoint, fences and those kinds of things, as well as alarms and surveillance equipment that would detect certain activities, and the physical presence of the security inspectors themselves that had to respond to those alarms. The biggest thing and the most noticeable thing to the employees of Rocky Flats and the public that saw pictures was the zone that we built around the production of special nuclear materials areas. The PSZ was called
What does that stand for?
Perimeter Detection Zone. Perimeter Detection Security Zone, I'm sorry. It's been a while. Basically, it was a double fence system, about 100 feet apart, and within that was a series of alarm systems that would indicate to us where and when an intrusion might have occurred. At that time, we also built 4 guard towers that were built around that perimeter zone, and manned 24 hours a day
By the security
department. And there were basically observation towers. It gave us an opportunity for a person to immediately check on an alarm that occurred in the perimeter zone. And it was also a fighting tower as well, if need be. So those kinds of activities happened. Some things that happened that was not quite so evident was the building of guard stations within, or security stations within the buildings themselves. So we had a system that became tighter and tighter and tighter as you got toward the material itself, special nuclear material. That you could start at the cattle fence at the edge of the property line, and then you came to a guard post that wasn't quite as tough to get through. You didn't have to have as tight a security, and you just kept going in and in. And as you got closer and closer, security got tighter and tighter. So. That was kind of how we progressed through time. Very simplistic view or explanation of that, but yes, there were changes through the year, and basically the changes were due to world situations, how the world was changing, and what
There was an increase in
increase
number
in
of
security.
fences.
Yeah, increase in the number of fences, absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, one of our big concerns was the protection of the surrounding communities, not just the protection of the material that we were working with, although that was a major concern. Part of all of the security functions were to protect the surrounding communities. You know, let's keep the material where it is, know where it is at all times, and help protect the communities.
Uh-huh. Did the fencing and all the security measures, was that designed by the security department, or did you get your orders from someplace else?
Basically, the Department of Energy had a set of orders that said, here is how you have to do certain things. here's how you have to build a fence if you build a fence. And so we took that information and used it to develop our systems at Rocky Flats. If there were any special considerations that we had to consider at Rocky Flats, then we could go to the Department of Energy and say, here's what we need to do. But we think that we are covered under your orders. So basically, it came from the government to us, and we did what we had to do to implement their instructions.
Uh-huh. Now, in our first interview, you talked a lot, very interestingly, about the different protests.
Yes.
But in going back over it, it wasn't clear to me. It sounded like the first big protest in 1978 was inside the perimeter of. Is that correct?
The 78 protest was, in fact, held on our West Access Road.
Okay.
So it was inside of the federal property line, which was on the west side, was marked by 93 highway, basically. So it would have been at the cattle fence portion of the property line. They asked and received permission from the Department of Energy, then the Atomic Energy Commission, but to have a protest, a peaceful protest, and they were given certain access to the West Access Road to have that protest. So in fact, it was on the Rocky Flats property, but they were there by invitation, if you will.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then did that continue? There was a big 79 protest. Was that the same place, or?
No, the 79 protest, what happened in 78, in fact, was that the agreement with the federal government and the protesters was that I think it was at 4:30 in the afternoon that they would all clear out and everything would go back to normal. In fact, that did not happen. There was a group of individuals in that protest movement that moved over to the railroad track spur that comes into the plant that's owned by the government, and set up tents and camped on the railroad spur. That lasted for quite a few days until the government decided that they really weren't going to leave and that they ought to do something to move them out of there, because we had to get trains in and out of there, and so anyway, at that point in time, Jefferson County Sheriff's Office came out and removed them from the tracks, and we were able to get on with our work at Rocky Flats. The 79 demonstration was held again with permission from the government on the north side of the plant site, nearer to Highway 128, west of Indiana Street and south of Highway 128. Somewhat removed from the core of the plant, but give them symbolic possession of some plant site property to hold their demonstration.
Mm-hmm.
So they were in two separate places.
Uh-huh.
But to continue on with the 79 process, one day they held the rally on the site that the government had let them have for the rally, and everything was okay. They did what they were supposed to do. They all left when they were supposed to leave. But the next day was a situation where they all went on to the East Access Road, the West Access Road, and the railroad track owned by the government, and where we, in fact, arrested 287 people that day, 283 of which were subsequently tried in federal district court.
Uh-huh. And so they were kind of going in different places in the 79.
Yeah, three different places in
Yeah.
79, the second day of the demonstrations, and we were aware that
That's
something like that was going to
Yeah.
happen, so we were prepared for it as well. But yes, they trespassed onto federal government property, Rocky Flats property, and when they were offered an opportunity to leave, they didn't take that opportunity, so they were subsequently arrested for trespass.
Right. Yeah. And you had described that
Yes.
very, very clearly before, but I just didn't have a good sense of where they were. Yeah. Now, some workers have referred to an incident where nuns got on site,
Yes.
and I don't think you and I talked about that. I was just kind of wondering if
May
you
not have.
were you involved in that at all?
Yes, I was. I don't remember the date exactly, but yes, two nuns made up some false badges, employee badges, and used them to come onto the plant site. They came in with the morning traffic on the east side, and as I described earlier, the security gets tighter and tighter as you get toward the core of the plant. Getting in that outer ring is not too difficult. Basically, at that point in time, all you did was held up your employee badge, and a security inspector waved your vehicle through the gate. They held up their employee badge during the morning incoming traffic, and were able to come onto the plant site. They went to the west side of the plant and raised a flag on a flagpole that had a skull and crossbones, as I recall, a black flag. They went down to closer to one of our production buildings, and on a fence they were hanging signs referencing Dachau and the war camps in World War II, and spreading fake blood around when our security people stopped them and arrested them. They were taken into federal district court as well, and both were sentenced to 6 months in jail for falsification of security credentials, basically. They were also convicted of trespass, but that didn't involve any jail time.
Was that a hard thing for you or for the security force? I mean, how did you react to that?
Well, it was a wake-up call, if you will, that we were now in an era that people were not going to abide by the rules, if you will, that are posted on the property boundary lines, and that we were in an era that we were going to have to become much more watchful of, quote, peaceful people, Americans, rather than foreigners and possible insiders in our operation. So it was kind of a wake-up call. It was a situation that was not pleasant for us to do, actually. Not very pleasant to go out and arrest a little old lady that has gotten a little overwrought with her emotions or whatever. That's not exactly a fun thing for the security people to be doing, but they put themselves in a situation that we had to react.
Were they dressed in as nuns?
No, they were not dressed as nuns. They were dressed as
Ordinary.
as ordinary people. They had, if I recall, jeans and sweatshirts or whatever.
Was that, as you think back, was that one of the more difficult things, or not in particular?
No, it was just an incident and a series of incidents that happened, particularly during the 80s. The 80s, we had an awful lot of activity like that, people trying to come onto the property and make their statements. And so it was not it was not as it was just another one in a series of things that occurred. But one of the first ones that occurred that gave us an indication of what we were in for, if you will.
Did you, I don't think we really talked about this before, how did you feel living in the community wherever you lived at that time? Arvada. And working at Rocky Flats? I mean, did you feel any criticism from the community, or what about that?
Well, for the most part, at least the people that I was in contact with in the community didn't have a feeling that Rocky Flats ought to go away. They felt that as we were trying to convey to people in the community that it was a safe place. It is a safe place to work, and if it were not so, our families wouldn't be living in the communities surrounding Rocky Flats. So for the most part, I think the general public was either non-committal about Rocky Flats, or they were not overly emotional about Rocky Flats one way or the other, or they felt that there wasn't a major problem there. So I didn't have any feeling about trying to hide the fact that I worked at Rocky Flats because of negative public opinion. Never once did that happen, or never once did I feel that was necessary.
And so far as you know, your kids didn't
They
have
didn't.
any problem?
No. The kids, I don't want to get into this very much. When the kids went to school, I mean, how delicately can I put this? That there were a lot of teachers that were anti-nuclear, let me put it that way. So the kids were subjected to not harassment, if you will, but some teachers would try to tell them how bad Rocky Flats is, and the nuclear industry in general. But they were not subjected to harassment as such. It was more gentle indoctrination, if you will, to try to change their minds as to nuclear industry in general. So, as a general rule, from the public, I don't think there were any undue pressures on the families at all, or at least I didn't feel any. There, some other families may have had some of those.
Yeah. And in terms of the tight security, you're not being able to talk to your family. Did you feel that, do you think as much as maybe other workers that worked in production? Or, because you could have talked more about...
Well, my family understood where I worked and kind of what I did, so they had no qualms about my not being able to talk about certain aspects of my work. They understood that, and it was not a problem. Whether because I was in security or not made any difference. It shouldn't have made any difference, let me put it that way. Everyone at Rocky Flats should have been in the same boat.
I see.
So not because they were in security or not in security. If you didn't have a need to know something at Rocky Flats, you weren't told it. Whether you worked there, or whether you were a family member, or whether you're a member of the community.
Did that change at all during the years that you worked there?
Not really. No. There were efforts toward the end of my career there to more involve the community in what they could tell them about health issues and those kinds of things. But the classified information that the government did not want to get to the wrong parties was always protected in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that Rocky Flats became more open with the public in other areas was evident as the years went by, yes.
Mm-hmm. As the public found out more about Rocky Flats after the fire. And
Yes,
mm-hmm.
yes, yes. I think a lot of what the public wanted probably was curiosity. Just what is it you do there? You know, more than a major concern, or at least this is my opinion, a major concern about the operation at Rocky Flats. Obviously, there were a very vocal group of people that would like Rocky Flats to go away, and it has, in fact, it is going away. But for the most part, I don't think people had a major concern with Rocky Flats.
how have you, of course you haven't really been working there during these years of cleanup, but you probably have been involved to some, have followed
Some
it.
degree, yes.
Uh-huh. Do you have any opinions on the cleanup and the way that it's proceeded that you would care to
Other
share?
than they spent an awful lot of money no, but a lot of money's been spent on that cleanup.
Uh-huh.
But I think all in all, the cleanup as I know it's happening is going pretty well. They've done the things that they need to do, in my opinion, to allay fears that the public might have had as far as what they're leaving there, how they're progressing on the cleanup, how they're demolishing certain buildings and certain equipment. I think they have done a good job of educating the public as to what they're doing and getting a buy-in from the public as to how they're doing the things. So, from what I understand about the cleanup, I think it's going very well. And what I understand is going to be the legacy, if you will, or how the plant or site is going to be controlled later is fine.
Uh-huh.
As I understand it, the core 350 acres or so are going to be still going to be fenced off. The buffer zone will be open to public, or parts of it at least, and that's reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's the radioactive materials and the contamination and those kinds of things are well contained or shipped out.
Uh-huh.
One of the two.
Do you have any thoughts or feelings about the Wildlife Refuge? You know,
I think it's a great use for the land. If they can't build a golf course there, then Wildlife Refuge has to be. It's a good thing,
mm-hmm.
and I'm completely supportive of that activity.
Do you, if you were the one making, the decisions about what to do on the Wildlife Refuge, would you have things that you would think shouldn't be done, or do you have any?
No,
opinions?
I don't think there would be any restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
As far as activities that go there, as far as open it to the public or not, I just don't think there need to be any restrictions, other than the 350 or whatever acres or 400 acres
Uh-huh.
core plant.
Uh-huh.
Don't misunderstand me. I don't think there's any problem with that, or will be when it's finished and completed. But for peace of mind, it's probably best if they fence that off. But for the buffer zone, I don't see any need for any restrictions.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
So whatever the fish and game people want to do, or open it to public for tours, or just close it and let the animals take it over. I don't think there need to be any restrictions whatsoever.
Can you think of any, particular experiences that we, maybe didn't talk about in the other interviews, with reference to security that you think, you'd want remembered or will really stand out in your mind?
No, I think we've covered the things that would be of importance to the general public. There's always incidences that occur within a department and things that happen that would be of interest mostly to the insiders. But I think we've covered with both the oral history and the video history things that would have been of interest.
One thing that I don't think that I asked you before was how it was for you, how you thought about the mission of Rocky Flats, making the very central part of the nuclear weapon. How did you think about that, and how did that feel to you? Even though, of course, you weren't part of the making of it, but
yes, the Rocky Flats mission was determined by Congress, and our Congress says we need to have these kinds of things to protect us against the world, if you will, during the Cold War. So I felt good about being a part of that, yes. As long as the government said these are the things that we need to do, I became a part of that and supported that wholeheartedly. So it was never, if it had been a problem, then I shouldn't have been at Rocky Flats. I should not have worked at Rocky Flats. I should have been somewhere else. If anybody had a problem with the mission at Rocky Flats, they should not have been there. And there may have been some, I don't know. But if there were, I didn't know about them. I think the people that worked at Rocky Flats in the production years truly believed in the mission, truly wanted it to be to do the best job they could possibly do, and all of us, I'm sure, felt that it was more of a deterrent than it was anything else. God forbid that we should ever have to use a nuclear weapon anywhere, anytime, anyhow. But I am certain in my own mind that it was a deterrent for others in the world not to use nuclear weapons. Mutually assured destruction, I think they call it. So I felt good about what we were doing at Rocky Flats, and had no problems whatsoever with supporting of that.
Well, I think we've kind of covered everything that I had in mind.
Okay.
Anything else that you would want to say?
No, there's a million stories at Rocky
Right,
Flats,
yeah.
but I'm certain that you're getting quite a few of them. But we could spend days and days and days talking about the minutiae of Rocky Flats, but I think we've covered what we need to cover with.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
You're
And
welcome.
I remember I did not put a date on this, so I'm going to say now we're meeting on October
October
1st,
1st.
2004.
The old man had a birthday in 14 days.
Oh, congratulations. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Thank you.